Right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome again to the Carlos Taco Show. We got some very special guests tonight. So, without any further ado, I'll have Miss Patty introduce everybody tonight.
Hi, everyone. We have amazing community leaders. We have Miss Reverend Wanda Johnson, mother of Oscar Grant. We'll be learning a lot about her foundation to honor her son's legacy. We have Ms. Dominique King. She's a community leader, advocate for the youth, for our community.
Awesome.
Lots to learn tonight for our folks listening in. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as well.
So we have an event coming up January 1st. Will be the 15th anniversary of a very important life lost here in the Bay Area. And this is Miss Wanda's son, to honor him and his legacy. And if you could tell us a bit about your story and what folks can do to help contribute and keep bringing change for our communities.
Thank you so much for having me. And, Oscar again was killed January 1st, 2009 at the Fruitvale BART station in Oakland. And since then, we have been working to ensure that not only is Oscar's story told, but those who have also been affected by police brutality, as well as now even going into community violence, that they also are recognized and their name is also made known. Because we know that Oscar's case was the first time in California history that an officer was charged with an on-duty shooting. That officer, he only received 9 months in a county jail. And many of us on this session and listening know people who have probably been incarcerated for less of an offense, but yet are serving more time than that. And so it still really speaks to our judicial system to let us know that we have a lot of work to do with our judicial system. So every year at the Fruitvale BART station, we hold a visual, bringing different community member leaders and community members together, allowing them to share their story. Also, we have different speakers, different musicians, different singers who also come. And we just uplift the community, uplift the families, encourage and let everyone know this year is 15 years of unity, because we know that it took the community to speak up because of the egregious act they saw against Oscar. It took the community voice to ensure that a conviction was served to the officer. The community prayed with us, they cried with us, they supported us, they drove to LA with us, they protested in LA. And so that was 15 years ago, and we still hold on to those relationships with those who fought with us. Now we're fighting with them to ensure that others do not have to take and go through the same thing that my family went through when we lost Oscar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if I can just chime in, when we talk about things being the first, Oscar Grant's murder was really the first murder that happened visually that the world was able to capture through cell phone footage. And so there were a lot of firsts. And even though it was a horrible thing that happened to Oscar, it allowed for many laws and legislations to be passed, even when it came to information having to be given to the public annually. And so out of his tragic death, a lot has happened, and the Oscar Grant Foundation has really been on the forefront of a lot of that work. The other thing that I want to mention is a strong reason why we continue to have the visual at the Fruitvale BART station is because Oscar Grant's story is not unique in the sense that this is something that just happened with Oscar and doesn't continue to happen throughout communities, both in the Bay Area and across the country. And so gathering in that space to uplift not only just brings the community together, but it takes a place that has so much harm and pain attached to it and turns it into an uplifting space where we can continue to build community and continue to tell Oscar's story at the forefront where it happened. So it is an important space. It is one that we do not gather, in vain. And so I just applaud Reverend Wanda for showing up every year and just turning her pain into purpose and being able to hold it there in that space.
Yes. I have a question. Antioch is going through teaching the history. There was a meeting the other night with the African American Committee, and families want to make sure that the history is taught to our generations forward. And this is one of those historical moments that needs to be taught. Like, as a parent, and I'm sure Dominique, you as well. Once that comes out in the Antioch Unified School District, what history looks like, it's these instances that our youth needs to know of, because it needs to there. We need an end point at some point, but healing is going to be a big part of it. And in this gathering, I could totally see that. Absolutely.
So I think what comes from that, and I would love Reverend Wanda to speak to this because it is her story, it is her family story, about how Oscars should be included in history, because
Yes.
we often talk about whose narrative is told. And so I would love her to speak to how she would like Oscar's story and what she would like it to look like.
Yes.
So we often say that it wasn't a victory, but it is history. That his story, what happened, because it was the first time in California history, that it will definitely go on even when I'm gone. It will still be spoke of. It will be spoke of in the court systems. Um, there was a young man, Deontay Wright, uh, who was killed. He was tased. The officer said she confused her taser with her gun, and she shot and killed him. Uh, and one of the arguments that was used was what happened with Oscar. So his case will go on throughout history. There's a case in Alabama, a young man named Jawan Dallas. He was tased to death. Uh, Oscar's case was referenced to that as well. And even attorney John Burris is actually part of the dream team lawyers that she have. And so um, we have to continue to tell the stories that are occurring, because if we don't, our children will not know uh, what has taken place in our society. They will hear about Columbus coming to America. But if we don't open up our mouths and share these stories that we know, the story of even George Floyd, the story of Eric Gardner, the story of Monte Rosa, the story of uh, all the other ones that we know, if we don't share these stories, if we don't continue to keep this on the forefront, then the behavior will be saying that it's acceptable when it's not acceptable. And the only way that we can continue to let them know that it's not acceptable is when we continue to talk about it and continue to get new laws implemented and laws that are in existence changed.
Absolutely. And just to add on, I think when we're talking about history, I think that we have to recognize that history is not these century old things that are happening. While they have to be incorporated in, Oscar's story, if we're thinking about history, is very young. It's a very young story, but it deserves its place, because without that, we're not then talking about these landmark cases that come after it. I think it's also important to be honest about what came from this. While, we say it wasn't a victory, it was history. And we need to make sure when the story is being told that it's clear that the family did not feel like they received justice. And that is a part of our justice system, right? There will be moments in history where we think, okay, because there was some kind of conviction, that means that it was right. There was justice served. And that's not always the case. I think, as people of color and just individuals that are in the society, we need a deeper understanding and education of our justice system as a whole. And I feel like Oscar's case is one of those that not only belongs, like you say, as history, but it is current. It is very still young, and what it's able to teach us moving forward.
Yes, no, all of this. I had a thought because in Antioch we have a dark history. Not just Antioch. This is a Bay Area. This is a national. This is also an international thing. I have friends overseas with grandkids that are African American and face injustices um, outside of the United States. But we're here, and one of my research, I focused my thesis on reparations and the generational forms of oppression on Black families, African Americans, and I learned. In my opinion, there's no amount of money to make up for all of the injustices, all of the pain, all of the different systemic forms of oppression in the political system, in the education system, in the financial system. But at the least, we can systemic change is the bare minimum because there's no amount of money. But I mean, if it was up to me, I would say get the jewels and the crowns that belong to the African American descendants and use that to fix our system because it's really complex. But I agree. We need system change to stop these occurrences and to teach the truth of what happened.
And I want to pass this over to Wanda because this has to do with our foundation. Because when we're thinking about systemic change, we are often only thinking about one side of the coin, right? And that's where I want to hit is with the Oscar Grant Foundation. There is a law enforcement equity training program that Reverend Wanda spearheaded. And this program is unique because when we think about police officers and their training, they go through an implicit bias, which focuses on themselves. Whereas when we talk about equity training, it focuses on them, not only themselves, but having an outlook on everything else that is happening in the community that they are going to be policing, right? And so I would love Reverend Wanda just to jump in and talk about that, because if there's going to be systemic change, it has to happen on both sides.
And we have to know that change is definitely necessary because when we look at the history of policing, we understand that from the 1800s that many of the same people that was riding the horses and gathering slaves are the same ones who end up becoming our police officers, right? And then their children. And so we learn too that racism is not something you're born with, it is a taught behavior. And so, because it's a taught behavior, many of those who came after their grandparents and their fathers and went into policing who had been taught to suppress African Americans were in the position of what they had been taught. So our system really started from our forefathers because we had no idea or no opportunity to sit down at the table to work to make the changes, right? So now we're at a place in our society where we understand that change is definitely needed, right? One of the things that I often talk about is that when you look at the policing system and how policing are certified or become police officers, we have to go back and look at that and begin to change the qualifications to become police officers. You know, I heard one person say it's just like you can become a police officer faster than you can a barber. And so, if that in fact is true, that continually tells us that we have a lot of work to do in our police system. We also talk about the immaturity of men versus women. We often say that men, when they're 18, 19, and 20, that they're really not as mature as they should be, and women have surpassed them in maturity. And so we find a lot of police officers at that age on the force, coming right out of high school, you know, doing maybe some doing a year in college and some going right to the training and getting into the police force, right? But yet they have not had that maturity level to even be in the police force. But we put them on our streets to protect and serve, and they really don't have an idea how to protect and serve because they have not even been within our society at a mature level that they should be before even entering into those positions. So one of the things that we would do is go in to the police forces and give training, offer the anti-bias training, offer racism training, offer the training. One of the ways that we had wanted to do it, which we have not had that opportunity like we would like to do it, is to show Fruitvale Station parts of the clip or the video of what happened to Oscar and discuss it and talk about what can be done in the future to eliminate these types of occurrences, right? So the police officers are required each year to take a certain amount of hours of training in the bias training, also in culture sensitivity training, right? However, it's not mandatory, and they're not all made to do it, and so we have to. One of the things that we want to do is be able to make sure that it's mandatory, make sure that we can go into these places, and when it is found out that there are bad apples in the police force, that they are taken out of the police force and no longer to perform on their duties. Because many of us who have jobs, if we perform badly, we are removed from the job. But in policing, when I would go to Washington, D.C., they said that our Bill of Rights is different from the police Bill of Rights. And so, because their Bill of Rights is different, where we may get terminated on a job, they may not get terminated. And so that's why we have officers who are able to kill someone in Alameda County, move over into Contra Costa County, and kill someone else, and move from there and go to another county and still have that same policing job. And so, one of the things that we're trying to work on is to not allow that to happen. That their record is made known, you know,
National database.
not just at the police station where they work at, but some kind of national, like you said, database where it can be brought up. Hey, officer whoever killed in Oakland, Antioch, and now Concord, and there's still no charges filed against him. So he cannot be allowed to be on the police force any longer. So that's one of the things. But it takes all of us
It does.
to come together and to work together to make sure that we are ensuring that these laws and the process and the procedures are changed.
Mhm.
And I think it's so admirable. And I have to say this, I think it's admirable because, with what happened to Oscar, it could have so easily, Reverend Wanda could so have easily been in a position to say, I don't want to work with any police officers. All police officers are bad. The system is, never going to change. It's broken. But instead, she actively works to work with police officers to ensure that, because we can't just right now eradicate all police officers. We understand that that's not going to happen, right here in this day and age. So we have to be able to, just like they've infiltrated our communities or come into our communities, to be able to go into those counties and those police force and have those conversations and network and build community with those officers who do want to see systemic change. And I think the more that we continue to do that, and the more that Reverend Wanda continues to do that, we're able to pull out those officers who are really there to do the right thing. And that's where systemic change happens, because when they feel that they have a voice, that there is agency for them to speak up, to work towards changing things, then that's when it happens. Versus, it's this idea that for so long things are able to be swept under the rug and kept quiet and systems in place. But Reverend Wanda is a disruptor, and she does it through like grace and love. She does it in a way that builds community. And so just for myself coming on as a CIO, I'm fairly new, but I'm just so proud of the work and the continual legacy that she's building for Oscar and for herself. So I just wanted to not miss a point in saying that.
Yes. Yeah, our community needs to support active leadership like this. You are leading this head on, Reverend Wanda, so thank you. I have a thought. Have any of you watched the Murdaugh series on Netflix? So the Murdaugh series on Netflix, you brought a point about how this sickness, this superiority is handed down. And in that series, there's about 3 episodes. It's a family that really got away with murder for who knows how long. But the murderer who murdered his wife and the son, um, his family is in those courts. So there's a court, he went to get held accountable, but in that court, there were portraits of his descendants that laid the laws, that had family or folks get away with certain things because that was their county and that's the way they ran things. But it's interesting how they moved to cover up the first murder that shed light on that corruption in that city. um I have another thing. I recommend it to anybody to watch it to get an idea of how this kind of corruption can be embedded generationally and how we can, of course, combat it. In Antioch, I asked one of the officers what the training looked like with the bias training. He said it was a 7-hour course. It was a 7-hour training. And that just took me aback because 7 hours is not enough to plant empathy, understanding, historical background of why we are the way why we are where we are. There was a system that was created, and we are products of the system that created us. So can we get more? Can we advocate for more than 7 hours, please?
And that's the work that the foundation is working to do. I love that you hit that point, because you cannot unlearn generational teaching, right? Especially in 7 hours. That's not going to happen. And so, as Reverend Wanda has said before, advocating for it to be mandatory, for it to be continual training, and just by being able to do that alone would create systemic change on a greater level, on a wider scale. I think one of the things that I love for people to understand is every law enforcement agency is different. But we find that there's still something very similar across the scale, even though the way agencies are ran is very different. And there's post, and it's I'm gonna mess it up. It's peace officer standards training. And that's just the minimum of what they have to do. But those that are in charge of creating the what is it, the standard of how they're going to accomplish it can look very different across the board. And so what I always say, and what Reverend Juan and I have conversations about, is how do you create consistent standard to get consistent, sustainable change? And that's really what the law enforcement equity training aims to do. But in that, because that's an adult step, I really want to talk about, we have to begin with our youth, right? We have to begin when they're younger, because I think statistically by the time they get to 12th grade in high school, they've already formed their opinions, their thoughts, their views. And so what the Oscar Grant Foundation really does is start at that youth level, whether it's through our recreational programs, whether it's through the tutoring that we hope to bring back, whether it's through just different programs that allow us to really talk to our youth and empower them at a very young age. Just something as simple as having conversations during a backpack drive. Reverend Wanda can speak to this, can be influential. And it's not just having the conversations with students and children and their family, but it's actually bringing those young officers, bringing law enforcement to these events so they can introduce, because once you know someone, it's very hard to look at them with a blank slate, and be able to do some of the things that are being done to individuals when you've known someone since they were a child. And I think Reverend Wanda can speak to this as well. Oh, you're muted.
And Dominique is so right, because what we have to work to do is to eliminate the from youth to prison pipeline. They're looking at our children at second and third grade and making a determination if they're going to prison or not. And we have to be wise enough to change that narrative, right? By offering our youth whatever we can, to ensure that that does not happen, that statistic, that thought process of our youth going straight to prison, that narrative be changed. And one of the ways that we try to change that narrative is investing in our youth from elementary, junior high, and even in college, right? Because we have to change the way that our system is structured. Because if we look at statistics and we look at our prisons is filled with Black and brown. And it's so much segregation, even in our prison system. In our prison system, you know, the separation of Black and brown is set in the prison system so that we hate one another. And that narrative, all of that has to change. And we start saying, it doesn't matter who you are. We want you to succeed. And we work with our youth to ensure that they are not part of the statistics that our society has already put over them as being and on their way to prison. And so, I definitely know that as our community continues to get educated and see that there is some change that needs to be done, and not waiting till it knocks on their door, but working now to make sure that it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen to anyone, that's when we will see our youth changing. Because if we look at it, our youth are not bringing the guns into these cities, right? Our youth are not bringing the drugs into these cities. They're being dropped off some kind of way. And until we begin to get wise enough and see it and begin to work against it, right? If we don't do that, then we can't expect change. So our change is focused on our youth to really begin to pour into them, implement to them, train them, teach them, support them, and let them know that there are leaders of tomorrow, and we're going to help them become the leaders that they have been created to be.
Mhm.
And I'll just put in this perspective and I'm putting on my educational advocacy hat here. It is so vital for organizations, and not just the Oscar Grant Foundation, because there are other organizations, to play a very specific role within our education system. Because when we talk about law enforcement, implicit bias, systemic racism, those things exist within our school system.
Oh, yeah.
And they exist within the teachers that are within some of these teachers that are in these classrooms. And what needs to be understood is that these students, these children, especially children of color, have a support system. Maybe mom can't show up. Maybe dad can't show up, but the Oscar Grant Foundation can show up. Their educational advocates can show up. So it is important for not only when we're just looking at law enforcement and just youth, individual youth, but we as an organization and a community are looking, how do we support? How do we show up? So that when our kids are being treated in a specific way, they know, oh, I better watch it, because somebody is going to be here for this child. Somebody is going to show up. And these children are going to speak up. And we are so proud of our youth. One thing that I have to say is, and I have young, children, and they are part of a generation that is so, they are forward thinking. They are loud and expressive in what they are asking for and what they deserve. And we have to be a part of the process of uplifting them, to allow them to feel safe enough to continue to use their voice. And I take it back to Oscar Grant, because when Oscar's Grant video went viral, and it was the first to go viral, it gave a voice, it gave agency, it gave a safe place for people across the nation. We have people from as far as Belize to Brazil to parts of Europe to Australia that reach out and say, this story, this video, this movie inspired me to speak out to what is happening within my own community. And so, like, we just have to provide the agency for our youth, and those that are in power have to know that there are people that are backing. Like, we will show up and we will show out. And so that's another portion of it that I think is why it is so important for us to target our youth and to be just in community with them.
Mhm. There was that was beautifully said. It's about the youth. There was a question about anyone doing that in the programs, and my brothers in Bridge to Builders, they are doing an amazing job out here in Antioch, and they are in the spaces. They have spaces in many of the schools in our district, and they're in the portables. They have an office, and I met with Johnny. We went to middle school together, and I'm so thankful and proud of my community. We grew up out here, but there's a need, and they're coming back and bringing it back and taking these students to colleges, taking these students to skyscrapers so they can see things outside of Antioch, and they provide the transportation. Yes, we need all those advocates that are here and different communities. We need to empower and stand behind them, because they're doing the footwork and making sure that our youth is set up. Our school district had many years and many opportunities to do better, but it's communities that are coming together. And I'll give an example. We had to end the school to prison pipeline. We had a small campaign. After the murder of George Floyd, there was a decision to implement school resource officers on the campuses, only 6 of them. Mind you, there's more than 6 campuses in the school districts, so we felt like we wanted counselors and not cops. And we went through a whole we voted, people voted. We saw that with one council, it wasn't happening. There were no dash cameras, there were no body cameras. They wanted to have and we wanted things for the people, for our students. We wanted protections during a pivotal time in history, to place officers on campuses. That would just be re-traumatizing for our youth.
Yeah.
So counselors are not cops, programs, resources. But I do agree, we still need police and communities, and that's beautiful that the Oscar Grant Foundation has that partnership and understanding that we have to work together to make things happen.
There was a question that came up that talked about families having the hard conversation. I saw it. I want to pass it to Reverend Wanda, because the reality is, Black and brown families, we have to have those those are conversations that we don't bypass. And so I would just like Reverend Wanda to talk about those hard conversations that we already are having and the hard conversations that we are starting to have.
You know, when we talk about the hard conversations, I did see something else in the talk that in the chat, which asked about programs. And one of the things that I want to say is that if we are studying and we're looking at our society today, there's a part of America that don't want people to know the history of slavery, the history of African Americans, right? And even in the Contra Costa County district, that has been a fight for several teachers that I know that's trying to get it put the curriculum put into the schools, right? So one of the things that I've said to them, well, hey, if they don't want it in the school, doesn't mean that it cannot be taught, right? We can have some Saturday sessions and get the kids to come out to a movie or come out to a day of chat and begin to teach them that way. Because one of the things that we know knowledge is power. The more that we know, right, the more influential we become, right, and the more greater we become when we know. And so it is so important for our training to start right at home, for us to begin to teach our children right at home. And we have to teach them not only about our history, but we have to teach them to make them aware of encounters that they might face. I remember Oscar being in the sixth or seventh grade. He was riding a bicycle after school. He did not have a helmet on, but yet he was stopped by the police. You're not in the seventh grade. And he was harassed by the police because he wasn't wearing a helmet, right? Back then, I don't even think it was the law that he had to wear a helmet. But anyway, they gave him a ticket, right? So this ticket followed him. We went to court and I said, tell him you're going to fight the ticket, right? So we told him, we were going to fight the ticket. This is when he turned 18 because we still found he had the ticket. So we told him that he was going to fight it. The judge started laughing and said, well, who knows where the officer is? We don't care, but we have a right to fight it. We want to fight it. And I'm saying that to say is that you have to talk to your children right now. It doesn't matter if they're in the fifth grade. You have to begin to have that conversation to say, hey, our society has, in a sense, changed the way that policing is supposed to be done. And you can be stopped for anything just because you're walking down the street and maybe you trip over the curb because the curb is not as smooth as it should be, and you kind of stagger. You might be stopped for that. So you have to be real with your children and really share some real examples, of some people that, hey, they were, walking or whatever they were doing and they didn't make it home. And so this is how I want you to handle situations if you ever encounter a police. I don't want you to say nothing. Look at their badge. When they talk to you, yes, sir. Okay. Don't feel like you're degrading yourself, but respect them. You don't need to cuss. You just need to listen. Remember their badge and their name. Because what we want you to do is to make it home safe. We do not want you to come home in a body bag. And so in a sense, to be able to make it home safe, it is going to require you to submit, even if you feel you're right. Mm-hmm. And even though that's not a guarantee, but we have to talk about to our children about these hard topics, about, hey, you might be mistaken and say, oh, we thought you were someone else, and you might get harassed for that and may not even be the person. But we have to talk to our children and let them know that we want them home safe. And so we don't want them to have any encounters. And if they have an encounter, these are the steps that they need to take. But make sure that they just remember the name, respect, get home, tell their parents what happened, and let their parents fight their battle for them.
Yeah. And I think along with that is empowering your children to understand their rights. As an educational advocate, I understand I'm an adult, so I have the educate. I understand what's the difference between your rights when it comes to being on a campus versus your rights to being in a public space, being in a private space. I do think that when we empower our children to understand their rights, but we lead with them understanding that even if you understand your rights, and maybe in the moment you are right, the objective, because we understand society and how implicit bias or systemic racism, or just maybe somebody's having a bad day, can end up with you losing your life. And so, even with knowing all of your rights, the objective is to make it home safe and let those that are capable of fighting those battles empower you to fight the battle with them. And that way you're not left doing that alone. And so, you know, there's going to be two opposing ends where people feel, well, I shouldn't have to do this, and you shouldn't tell your kid. And my thing is, at the end of the day, when I'm looking at my 23-year-old son, who is a Black man, he is 1 year older than Oscar when he lost his life. I am not worried about him proving a point in the moment. I am worried about him coming home so he can have dinner with his family. When I talk to my daughters, because they can easily be a Sandra Bland, I am not telling them that, just tell them whatever you want and you have the right. No, what I'm telling them is understand your rights, understand what is being violated in that moment, take note of it, and then come home safe so we can fight those battles, whether it's in public or at school. And so it does need to be a conversation that while we are empowering our youth, we need to teach them the accountability and the responsibility. And it's sad but true, the restraint that sometimes law enforcement or educators don't have. We are having to teach our children to have a level of restraint or humility that may not be what they're in front of at the time. And that's just that is the truth. So the Oscar Grant Foundation plays a major part in holding I'm going to lose the word, holding conference committees or conferences where we bring the youth together to explain that, to have those conversations. I know in Antioch, the youth, East Contra Costa County Youth NAACP is working to have a Know Your Rights campaign, which I think is wonderful. Looking forward to that getting off the ground. It's looking like it's going to be a series. There's some great players that are going to be involved in that. And I know that you just had Gavin Payton, who is the president of the East Bay Youth NAACP on. And the foundation looks forward to partnering and working with them as they get ready to take that on.
Oh, that's good news. It was an honor to have him here and listen to his voice. And I've seen him through the city council meetings over time, and he has found his voice. That's leadership. That's leadership. And I look forward to that campaign. And because those rights matter, all rights. And it's almost intentional for us to not know. And that's just the way the system is. For instance, there's a recent law that has passed or will be passed, and that's for folks with a criminal background. They will have a voice in the ballots. I don't know which law that is. I'm going to look into it, but yes.
Yeah, and I think what we have to really let it be known is that you have the right to vote. A lot of people come out of the criminal system and they don't understand. You have the right to vote. Your right to vote is being reinstated. So making sure that you're registering to vote, making sure that you understand that. And one thing that I want to get across is, and I hope that, not hope, but I foresee the foundation doing in the future is having that governance education portion, right? Because people oftentimes look at a ballot and there are some things, and even sometimes I look at a ballot and I don't know everything's on the ballot. That does not stop you from voting what you know about. that's on that ballot, right? And so there's an education piece that goes along with that. And I think we're coming into a large election. And while the Oscar Grant Foundation can't endorse, we definitely can educate. And so that's what we look to do.
That's how we made change happen in the city of Antioch. That's how we did it, and it's possible. I mean, we didn't have evaluations for our police force. I believe it was over 11 years without any evaluations, and that's one of those standards that should just be a standard operating procedure every year, evaluation, and to improve everything overall, but most importantly, the quality of life for African American.
Yeah. And when we're talking about this, there's a portion of this that I think is valuable to the conversation. There's a lot of trauma attached to this conversation, a lot of pain that's attached to this conversation. And you cannot leave this without talking about mental health. Because a lot of the young men that were there on that platform that day that Oscar lost his life, they are grown men now, but they still face the trauma of that night. Some of them are no longer here with us.
Absolutely.
And so there's trauma attached with that. The mothers of those sons and daughters who have lost their lives or have had encounters with police, there is trauma that is attached to that. If we're taking it out of just law enforcement, there's trauma attached to gun violence, to violence. There's trauma that is attached to those that have lost their life because of a mental health crisis. And so with talking about one thing, we have to talk about how are organizations empowering through mental health. And so with the Oscar Grant Foundation, we have a Life After Loss convention that we do. And we also have a Healing Hearts program. And Reverend Wanda spearheads that every week. And I just want her to talk about that because I don't want to leave this conversation because there may be someone out there who's listening that goes, oh, that's something I want to be a part of. So Reverend Wanda, I'm segueing back to you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. So we host a Life After Loss program where we go through the stages of grief. We talk about life after the loss. It's also very important because many people who lose their loved one by systematic violence, by community violence, they don't get the treatment or they don't get the healing that they need. So one of the things that we do, we offer every week and every Saturday, we do a Life After Loss from 12 to 1 where people can jump on and we talk about the 5 stages of death. Right. We talk about that life after loss. Right. We talk about tools that they can put in their toolkit to help them with their healing journey. So, for example, a tool that they might put in their toolkit, maybe they're not journaling right now, right? Maybe they haven't wrote a letter to God or to their higher power to ask, why did this happen, or share how they're feeling. So we say, put journaling in your toolkit. Start to journal, write out your feelings, right? Whatever it is you're feeling right at this moment, write it out. If you're angry, write out you're angry. And you're angry, why? Because of whatever, because it happened and how it happened. And you didn't get to fulfill the goals and dreams and plans and visions that you had with the child that you wanted to. So we work with them to try to get them to write those things out. Not only to write them out, but we give them other tools to put in their toolbox to help them to heal as much as they can, right? Because we know that hurt people, right? So in order for us to help, right, we want to try to have people whole so we're not walking around hurting each other. A lot of our young men are walking around angry because there's things that they saw that we cannot even imagine ever seeing or having saw. And so their feelings have been suppressed. And so one of the ways that we try to encourage is to share their feelings. As we have the support sessions, they talk about their loved one, they talk about how they're feeling. And so we do that every weekend. And then once a month, we have been trying to get together with some of those family members who come out. And we've been to different spots to have them come. And Dominique was our last MC, and she did an outstanding job. You don't want to miss her. So, and we are planning to come do it in Antioch. We're taking it to San Francisco. We're taking it to Concord. So we're going to be going all around our area and hosting life after loss sessions. And so when we come to Antioch, I know Dominic knows a lot of people, but also we'll be asking you guys to help us and to invite those who have suffered a loss to come to start their healing process so they could get some of the tools to put in their toolbox so they could walk away from the session with some tools that they could use when they're feeling depressed or feeling down or feeling angry, because we know that as you go through the grieving process, that life is like a roller coaster. Some days you're up and some days you're down. And all we're trying to do is to provide a level, a neutral, a area where they're able to walk through this life. And when they feel the ups and the downs coming, that they pull out this tool and begin to use it to neutralize them back to, stability.
And I know Reverend Wanda has to hop off, but don't forget to grab her book. She has a book coming out, Turning Pain into Purpose. It's her story and Oscar's story, and it just talks about the social justice aspect of it. And it's a powerful read. If you choose to attend our gala February 24th, 2024, celebrating 15 years, with your ticket, you actually receive a signed copy of her book. So Turning Pain into Purpose. I'm already claiming it. It's a bestseller. But I do know that Reverend Wanda has to hop off, and I don't want to hold her. But thank you, Reverend Wanda, for being here tonight.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you so much. God bless. Have a good evening.
God bless you.
So hopefully I do her some justice. Just me up here.
That was beautiful. So much knowledge dropped, and she's been fighting this battle for a long time. And there's a lot of other mothers fighting this battle, but to have that light, that light to lead us.
And she's often called, Oscar was what we like to say, the spark of Black Lives Matter. And I often say that Oscar was the Emmett Till. Because not only was his death displayed for the world to see, but Wanda did so. She didn't ask for people to take down the videos. She didn't ask for people to, stop sharing. Her message was, no, let them see. Let them see what they did to my son. And let this be a message across, across the nation so that this does not happen again. And although this happens, in this day, in this age, her work has not stopped. Her support for mothers does not stop. And if you know Wanda, it's to know that she may be in a different city every week. She will be on the phone with a mother almost every day, with another child that's lost their father or their mother. And so her work has truly been turning her pain into passion. So I'm just honored that I get to be the person that is, a volunteer and a CIO for the foundation.
Absolutely. So much. Carlos, what you got?
Yeah, when you mentioned about her, reaching out to mothers, she reached out to me too when my son was killed, so and it was a really tough time for me, and what she told me really helped, so I know what you mean. And I was just teasing her before we started the show that she's always flying here and there, and like right when she gets back, she goes and flies again, and I'm like, I know you're flying for free now. You got enough miles on there. And but I really did appreciate her time here tonight with us. And for everybody out there, give her add her to your prayers, because the Reverend Wanda's, she's totally busy. She's not, and when she's home, or I don't know if she does it when she's gone, but she go lives in the morning, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's live praying, blessing folks throughout their day.
Right,
And one of the ways that people can really, we are always looking for volunteers for the Oscar Grant Foundation. You can reach out via oscargrantfoundation.org. You can also follow us online on Instagram. Everything is the Oscar Grant Foundation.
right.
Consider coming out to our visual, which is January 1st. Starts at 11 a.m.
Let's
You
put that
can
up.
also subscribe to our newsletter. And then February 24th, 2024 is our annual gala. And I say this with so much love. Oscar's grand story is 15 years, right? 15 years. And since that time, so many people have lost their lives.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it is important, because people sometimes ask, oh, why do you keep going? It's been so long. There's other stories. You cannot tell someone who has lost their loved one and is still seeking justice when to stop.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot tell someone who lost someone who they believed would be in ministry with them. And this may not be the ministry that Wanda believed that her and Oscar would be in, but it is a ministry. And so we just continue to do the work, because we know that change is with purpose and with intention. The Oscar Grant Foundation has provided over $250,000 in college and trade scholarships. We've provided over, I think it's close to 10,000 backpacks since we began our drive. Last year, we reached 2 counties. We are looking to expand outside of that. We have 3 recreational basketball teams.
Wow.
And we work to make sure that they go on college tours, that their flights and their ability to play is all at the expense of the foundation. So the work that we do is so intentional, and with the belief that we can create change within our community. And so I'm just honored that you had us on tonight, and you just let us not only tell Oscar's story, but talk about the foundation.
Wow. Yeah, thanks again. I appreciate your time, Reverend Wanda's time too. I'm also going to put all the information you said on the in the description after this goes on YouTube. So, Miss Patty, you got any final words or final thoughts?
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and we're going to keep connecting and unifying as communities. Tomorrow is one of the last hearings for the Racial Justice Act on the police officers in Martinez at 1:30 p.m. The outcome of this, we'll just be standing by and hope for justice and accountability and justice for all of the families, all of the grieving families, and much power and love to continue to heal. Thank you, Dominique King. You're an amazing leader, our community voice for many voiceless. So thank you.
Thank you. The work doesn't stop. For those listening, register to vote.
Yes,
A
yes.
no vote is still a vote, and not voting is still a vote. So
Right.
register and make your voice heard.
Right.
Yes.
And with that, we're going to end the show. We want to thank everybody for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe, and show your support by telling a friend. And for anybody else here, or Miss Patty or Dominique, any final final words real quick, and then we're going to end the show showing the flyer, so that way you guys can see where it's going to be at. So Miss Patty.
January 1st. January 1st is going to be a big day for the Bay Area. Let's go.
You took the words. There you go, Patty. You sealed it.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. God bless, and we'll see you soon.